and we've got Derek ready to rock and roll. I can't wait to get started. This is going to be quite a show, my friends. So pay close attention. Yes, and get ready to be red pilled. Hello, Derek. Finally, we get to talk.
Hello, Doctor. Thank you so much for having me on today.
It's my pleasure. Robin is easy, or Doc. Robin or Doc, whatever you prefer.
All right, you got it.
Okay, so I've gone over just a little bit of your basic breakdown from the copy that you have on your website. I told them about the calculator, which I've started playing around with. I have to tell you, which I think you know, it's addictive. So,
It is.
yes.
It's taken over my life, you could say, for sure.
I can understand, because all of a sudden, after listening to a couple of your shows, I'm looking at these events and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder what this is. Wait, there's two things. One here, in Florida, on the beach with the building collapsing. There's another house that collapsed the same day, same morning in Mercer County, New Jersey. And it's like, maybe I better run the Robin, you better get your stuff done first.
No kidding. Yeah, I find myself having to ease my way into work some mornings. Like this morning, for instance, I did 3 posts before I started. So, yeah, I mean, once you learn this code and realize what's going on, it's really impossible to unsee it, so to speak.
Well, can you tell us how you did see it? I mean, was this when you were a kid? Were you always the kind of kid looking around? What were you like as a kid?
My parents often joked that they used to call me the little old man. Like when I was 5 years old or so, I would stand and like watch a sunset with my hands on my hips and talk about how pretty it was. It's like, who does that? My search for truth began, well, pretty early actually, when I was about 18, 19 years old. I met a guy at work who told me about the website InfoWars, which is run by the wonderful Alex Jones, who it's kind of a topic on his own.
Yes.
A lot of people believe he's kind of a disinformation agent, sort of led to, he's in place to lead those seeking for truth to a kind of a gray area. And, it's easy to make fun of him. People think about conspiracy theorists. They often think about Alex Jones, and they're just like, that's just ridiculous. But anyway, he had some good work at the time. I mean, in regards to 9/11, especially. And I always was suspicious of 9/11. I remember sitting in school. I was a junior that year. We were watching the events unfold on television, and we tuned in pretty late. When we finally turned the television on, there was only one building standing. And I looked around at everybody and I said, where's the other building? Like, what happened? And they were like, oh, I guess it collapsed. I'm like, what do you mean it collapsed? That doesn't make sense. Like a plane hit it and the building collapsed? So I was like questioning it out loud even then. I met this friend who then introduced me to Prison Planet and InfoWars, and I started learning about 9/11 and all the suspicious things that were going on around it, shutting down the buildings for electrical work in the weeks leading up to the event, a number of other things that really kind of led me to believe, this was an operation far beyond just 19 guys on a airplane. Now, again, I was pretty young, 19, 20 years old. I figured I knew it was a conspiracy, but I didn't know what to do about it. I had to live my life. I had to make money. I actually didn't finish high school, which is a fact that not a lot of people understand. And, a lot of people consider me pretty smart, so that's probably surprising. But it was just that I kind of considered myself ahead of my time in school. It was ever since 3rd grade where I decided that it felt like a waste of time being there. The schoolwork wasn't stimulating anymore. I was bored. I was doing my own things during class. So, let's see. Let's fast forward then about 10 years and the year 2015. And particularly the event that really started waking me up here was the Charleston church shooting. I remember watching coverage of this and looking at the guy who was arrested, and, he's shooting these mean looks at the camera. And something about it felt manufactured, especially since it was a case involving race, where it was like, 9 black people gunned down by an angry white kid who wanted to kill black people. I felt like it was trying to force something on me. Like like now I'm supposed to be worried about racism. It was very unique, right? And then you had the footage of the kid getting arrested and they were all nice to him. They bought him a meal. I was like, what is going on here? It seems fake. So I went online and I started to look like, just for alternative news sources, media, just kind of exploring. And I found that people still thought Sandy Hook was a hoax shooting. And I was like, whoa, like this conspiracy thing is way out of hand. I'm going to go and I'm going to find, the evidence that this happened. It's not going to be that hard. I'm going to show these people they need to be realistic. They need to get back to reality. Well, after about 2 days, 3 days of digging, rather obsessively after a certain point, I kind of came to the conclusion that it didn't happen. There were just too many weird things surrounding it, just like 9/11. And if it did happen like they told us, many of those things just wouldn't have been an issue. You can, for instance, just look at the houses that the families of the victims had. A lot of those houses were given to them on Christmas Day in 2009 for $0. And it was like 8 of 18 families received their homes this way. And, that's pretty anomalous, right? And that detail on its own doesn't necessarily raise an eyebrow, but when you look at everything else that surrounds it, it was just too much.
Sure.
So
you got a lot of digging done. You got a lot of information.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of absorbed me once I realized that something was up, because even thinking back to Sandy Hook, the two things that really stuck out to me was the dad named Robbie Parker, who was laughing as he stepped on the podium, and then the interview with the medical examiner who supposedly did the autopsies on all the dead children. And those both seemed really, really weird to me. Not so much that I was like, oh, it's all fake, but I do remember thinking it was odd. And when you tack those onto the rest of the anomalies, like I said, it's pretty clear that nothing really happened like they said it did.
Sure, but how did that get you where you are with the numbers? My God.
That's a great question. I mean, if you had told me that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, like 3 or 4 years ago, I'd laugh at you. But yeah, it's a wild story. So among those, like I said, I started looking for alternative news sources and media sources, and YouTube was and unfortunately still is really the best place to find that. And there were a lot of channels that I found that, seemed like they were speaking truth. A lot of them seemed produced as well, with their own music, with their own special graphics. There was one guy who was making videos that didn't have those. His name was Zachary K. Hubbard, and he's the author of the book Letters and Numbers that I now have on my main website at gematrinator.com. And his videos kind of stood apart, not just because there was no real production value, but because I felt like I was learning something. I always knew that numbers were significant to the occult. I mean, the fact that 9/11 happened on the date 911, like the emergency dialing code, I always felt there was something to numerology with these things, but I kind of assumed that it was too hidden for us to really discover and figure out, Like if they're going to use numbers for these rituals, they're going to make it so people can't discover it. I was just under that assumption. But then Zach was talking about this concept that I hadn't even really heard of before, as logical as it was, called Gematria, otherwise pronounced Gematria, which is actually the correct pronunciation. We pronounce it Gematria for the most part. And it just kind of made sense, you assign a number to each letter relative to its position, and then you add them up. And if you start paying attention, you start realizing some really funny things. So for instance, many of us are familiar with the significance of the number 33. We see this number all over the place. And really what it comes down to is the human body. We all have 33 vertebrae in our spine. And in certain secret societies, namely Freemasonry, it's said that the 33rd degree of Freemasonry is the highest. And what this represents is the ascension of consciousness from the basically unraveling of the kundalini from the bottom of the spine through the top crown chakra of the head. And through that, you travel 33 vertebrae. In the language of Gematria, using the reduction method, which is one of the base 4 methods when you come onto the site, the reduction method is pretty simple. It uses the rules of numerology to reduce every double-digit number to a single digit. So A through I is numbered 1 through 9, just like the alphabetic order. Once you get to the letter 10, or the letter J, which is the 10th letter. You see, I mix these up all the time in my own head. Since J is the 10th letter, 1 plus 0 equals 1. So instead of adding 10 to the equation, if the letter J, you add 1. And this concept goes all the way through the letter Z. Z is the 26th letter. 2 plus 6 equals 8. So Z becomes 8. Well, in reduction numerology, the word people, and think about how people is spelled really strange, right? P-E-O, like People.
Mm-hmm.
People sums to 33 in the reduction method. The word person also equals 33 in reduction. So to me, that's kind of like the basis of this whole study. And again, 33 degrees in Scottish Rite Freemasonry. The word masonry in reduction also sums to 33. So I came across Zach's videos and I found them pretty intriguing. At the same time, I kind of thought he was crazy because not only was he doing this numbers and letters stuff, but someone would be in the news on a particular date and he would say, oh, it's been 58 days since this person's birthday. Freemasonry equals 58. Secret society equals 58. And I'm like, dude, this is too much. I would just scroll past it. I would just skip past it because I thought, there's probably something to this numbers, but let's not get crazy here, right? But then you start paying attention once you have that, those eyes to see, and you realize, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then you look at the next story, you go to Zach's blog, and he's like, hey, it's been 33 days since his birthday. And the person's last name sums to 33 or something. And I'm like, okay, this is getting weird, And at that point, this was around 2016. I had been following his work for several months, and kind of began to get more and more acclimated to it and pay more and more attention. So around that time, I started to build my own calculator so I could study things on my own, because the only calculator online that was available was Riding the Beast, where you had to select a drop-down box, click a button, and then you get the value for the word in one cipher. And I had been fortunate enough that I was in a position at work where I learned programming. So I started programming in Excel, and I made my own Gematria application for Excel, which used, I had like 10 default ciphers. Because it's not just the alphabetic order and reduced. We also discovered, well, I actually put reverse Gematria into my application, and then Zach started paying attention to it and said, whoa, 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 this whole reverse Gematria is like the other half of this puzzle. And
how do you, excuse me, if I can interrupt you 1 second, how do you decide which type you use? English ordinal, full reduction, reverse, Sumerian? I mean, how do you pick the one that would be appropriate?
Well, you don't really pick them. What I try to explain to people is that gematria is sort of a tapestry. And what this whole thing is geometry within the language. So when you first come to the website, you see these base 4 ciphers. And those 4 ciphers are English ordinal 1 through 26, English reduction, which is the cipher that I just explained, reduced to a single digit. And then there's the 2, it's the same method, but with the reverse alphabetic order. So you have reverse ordinal and then reverse reduction. So when you type out a word or phrase, it doesn't just have one value. It's going to have 4 base values. And, think about this as a geometric quality, right? The square, for instance, 4 corners, 4 sides that are all equal. And gematria actually comes from the Greek word geometria, which is, geometry, and has the same base word as geometry. And again, gematria is geometry within the language. And if you go to the website and just type out the word geometry, you'll find that it sums to 108 using the alphabetic order. In the reverse alphabetic order, geometry also sums to 108. So there's reflection right there. And this number 108 isn't arbitrary. It's very, very significant. And what this comes down to is the mathematics of the sun and the moon. So much of this study is based off of mathematics of the 2 largest celestial objects in the sky. The sun is approximately 108 times wider than the Earth, and the sun is 108 times its own diameter from the Earth. On the other hand, the moon is also 108 times its diameter from the Earth. And when you write out in gematria, full moon, it sums to 108 ordinal and 108 reverse. So to me, those are some of the best examples to show that this language was constructed with these mathematics of the sun and the moon in mind.
Wow, it's fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was. I at first I had an Excel application. I had no programming experience in HTML or anything like that, and I realized, in order for this to really pick up, I had to build a website. And one day I had surgery in January of 2017, and I was just recovering. And I said, all right. I woke up one day and I said, I'm going to make a calculator online by the end of the day. So I bought the website, figured it out. I just hammered through it until I had a calculator, which was a little after midnight. And pretty much overnight, I like to think it started revolutionizing everything. Zach Hubbard, who I learned this from originally, he had I believe he started making YouTube videos in 2014. He started his blog in 2013. And this is a guy who was in a good position financially. He decided that this was important information. I need to quit my job and do this all the time until it spreads. And, so his commitment definitely paid off. Now, his YouTube channel lasted for nearly 3 years. And just a couple months after I launched my website, suddenly YouTube deleted his channel. And they found all sorts of ridiculous reasons like bullying and harassing. And they ended up deleting like 14 of his channels. He kept trying to
Wow.
make a new channel. They just kept deleting them one after the other. Eventually, they deleted my channel back in February of this year. And, some could make an argument that Zach maybe got banned because of how he was talking. He liked to talk about the Jews a lot. He was very strongly worded in how we need a revolution and to kill certain people and stuff. And I was never like that. I kind of hold the belief that we do need a revolution. But as far as, who's responsible for it, it's not one particular religious sect. It's not an ethnicity. Let's get the word out that this is what's happening. Then let's figure out who's responsible, hold them accountable, and then take the world back like we need to. Because right now it's out of control. They've created this system that's built off of lies. And in my opinion, they believe they've dumbed us down quicker than they actually have. Now, granted, a lot of people out there, the dumbing down has worked. But, the human spirit is too strong. It can't be enslaved, I believe, when there's people who believe in God and really want right for the world. So, it was only a matter of time until people started picking up on what they're doing. And, when I started my YouTube channel, and I guess we can get into this in a little bit, but
Sure.
it started out pretty much all conspiracy theory that all of this numerology was being done by people to lie to us. Then I kind of realized that this whole idea of gematria and numerology, this is based in a real world organic code, and all of us are born by the numbers. We all die by the numbers. And I think like you can kind of tell your path by your own numerology in life. So this is a discovery I made after the fact. Long after I built the calculator, I realized that my name, Derek Tikkuri, equals 142 in the alphabetic order. The word gematria equals 142 in the reverse order. The name Derek equals 92. Numbers equals 92. And then what's really spooky is that there's this other cipher called Jewish gematria, which is based in the original Latin alphabet. I commonly say in my work that this is actually the most significant cipher, which may or may not be true. But the reason I say that is because it gives you very, very large numbers, and therefore there's less room for coincidence. So my full name in Gematria, Derek Michael J. Tikkuri, equals 1,198 in that Latin cipher. And the phrase reverse gematria equals 1198 in that same method. And nobody was looking at reverse gematria before I built my calculator and put it in there. So, you talk about movies like The Matrix. And in my opinion, those movies are trying to kind of clue us into what our reality really is. And, it's something that I think was sequestered to secret societies. This knowledge is not for everyone. Back in the 1400s, roughly, this knowledge was brought into Europe, and the Catholic Church and others, shut it down. These people who were trying to share this knowledge, they were shunned, and some of them were, I think, extricated from the church. Well, And that's because this knowledge is kind of creepy. You start to look at the numbers behind your own name and birthday, and you realize that there's something going on. There's what we're experiencing as our reality is only the topmost layer of a
Mm,
number of workings underneath that I believe.
great answer. Yes. Great explanation. Yeah. It's this like amazing lattice work that's structured beneath everything. And you keep pulling away each layer, and there's more with what you're describing. So please continue. You're painting a beautiful picture.
Yeah, thank you. So you know, I try to make this as simple as possible, and I didn't always do that. If you're unfortunate enough to watch some of my first videos that I made, they were I was kind of all over the place. I was talking about a lot of different ciphers that may or may not be relevant. I do have a presentation called Signs of Time, which I tend to recommend to everybody for the first time. I think it's probably due for a remake at this point, given everything I've learned over the last year and a half. But anyway, uh, recently I had a video that went, like I guess you could qualify it as going viral. Now, mind you, YouTube, they don't like our work. They've censored us, they've suppressed us before. So I don't think you'll see any of our videos go like viral in the millions. However, a video I made on the numerology of the death of a rapper, XXX Tentacion. This guy was a #1 selling rapper on the Billboard charts. He died on June 18th, 2018. And I think part of the reason this video got about 250,000 views on YouTube is
Mm.
because I explained how I predicted that on this date we were going to get a major sacrifice. Now, I haven't ever pinned down who's getting sacrificed, but let me just kind of go back and talk about some of my predictions. I've had one prediction I think that completely missed. However, let's look at like January 15th. I predicted that we would have a sacrifice, and we had the death of the Cranberries singer, Dolores O'Riordan. My video on that got about 50, 60,000 views. The next date I predicted was March 1st, and it turned out to be March 2nd. We got the beginning of the Austin bombings, which was like a month-long terrorist thing. And I have my reasons for being one day off, but won't get too deep into those. The next date I predicted was March 8th, and we didn't get the death on that date, but we did have the funeral of David Astori, who was a major soccer player who dropped dead suddenly. Then we had April 20th was my next guess, and that was the death of a big-time DJ named Avicii. This was a guy who made, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars, literally, over the course of several years DJing. And he died on April 20th. And all the numbers I said that would have been responsible for the sacrifice were found in his name and the number of days to his birthday.
Okay,
Uh,
so let me get a little clarification here, because that's what I was wondering. What was, how were you able to do it? By looking at what? Is it the relationship of the numbers of the name to the days until their birthday? Or what balance, or what, how do you put it together that you're able to then say something of this type of magnitude is going to happen on such and such day?
Sure. So in these cases, I had, like I said, I didn't predict who would get sacrificed. So I
Yeah.
didn't have the knowledge of the name, Gematria, or birthday or anything. What I'm using is very simple: the dates of solar eclipses. So this code of letters and numbers is rooted in the Bible. The Bible has a lot of numbers in it that are spelled out. In fact, the fourth book is called Numbers, 4 being the number of foundation. And so in the Gospels, there's something called crucifixion darkness. And in 3 of the 4 Gospels, it's stated that the sky turned dark during the crucifixion of Jesus. And it's tough to find a historical precedent for this, to find out whether or not it's an eclipse. Now, it's very interesting. There was an eclipse that passed very, very close to Israel in the year 29 AD. And these total eclipse paths only pass through this part of the world once every several hundred years. So it's possible that Jesus was actually crucified in the year 29 during this eclipse. There's other scholars who say that because it said the crucifixion happened near Passover, that an eclipse would have been impossible. So maybe it was something like volcanic ash or clouds. But either way, there's this recurring theme of there being some kind of darkness in the sky during the crucifixion. And some scholars do believe this really was a solar eclipse. Either way, the symbolism remains the same. Now, think about how Jesus was crucified at age 33, according to the New Testament. The word eclipse in reduction equals 33. When you write out crucifixion of Jesus Christ using the alphabetic order, 1 through 26, this phrase sums to 303. And in numerology, zeros are ignored in the results. They're not taken into account because, a zero is just a blank space to a numerologist. So essentially, you have the number 33 in that phrase. So what I realize is that there's really something very special about these eclipses. And this kind of dawned on me last year. 3 months, 3 days before the Great American Eclipse on August 21st, we had the death of Chris Cornell. The name Chris equals 33 in reverse reduction. 33 days before the eclipse, we had the death of Chester Bennington. And in reduction numerology, Chester equals 33. So to me, those were big clues that these rituals are heavily centered around the eclipse. And the more I paid attention to it, the more this became clear. So this brings us to the death of this rapper. His name was XXXTentacion. And the reason I was able to say, okay, June 18th, 2018 is going to be a big time sacrifice date. And up to this point, I had only really said, that we'd see a sacrifice. I never really said it would be a big one. This one I would qualify as being pretty big, not only because it was the death of this guy who a lot of people are saying is the Tupac of this generation, but because there was another famous rapper named Jimmy Wapo who was murdered on the same day in a different city. So we actually got the deaths of two rappers. And in Gematria, the word rapper equals 74 ordinal. The name Jesus equals 74. And this is the same thing that happened back when Tupac and Biggie were killed in the 90s. The name Biggie equals 39 ordinal. He died on the date March 9th, written 3/9. The word eclipse equals 39, reverse. And there was a total solar eclipse on the date that he died, March 9th, 1997. And remember, there's only like 6 to 8 total eclipses per decade. So this is absolutely the code that the record industry, which is a collection of industries, television, film, political, military, industrial, they're using this code of letters and numbers to script these things out. And if people know about it, it's impossible to unsee, and therefore they can't be fooled and swayed by it. There are a lot of people who are mourning the death of this rapper. It really disrupted their lives. They loved his music. Maybe some of these girls really had a crush on him. And then he's dead just like that overnight. And, that's part of what they're trying to do to us, I think, is to keep us in this fearful mental state where, catastrophe can happen at any time. And, that's a big part of this, too. There's this spiritual warfare element going on. And,
yes.
By building these stars up and then suddenly having them sacrificed, you can kind of see what it does to the young people,
Destabilizes everything, keeps them, they don't know what's going to come next. Who are they going to lose? Who's going to, die? Is it them or someone else? Yeah. I'm just wondering, I don't want to take you away from this, but were you familiar with what happened in Siberia 2 days ago, where during the day, the sun disappeared and there was darkness for 3 hours? And coming up, I think in another day or two, we have a lunar eclipse. I'll forward that article for to you to look at and see if there's something that fits together with those two things.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I have not heard about that, so I'm going to look into that for sure. This lunar eclipse that we're having on Friday is going to be the longest one of the century. So it's definitely a pretty big one. It's also the second total lunar eclipse of the year, which is rare. So we can get into that a little bit. Just to finish this thought, though, about how I was able to predict the date for it.
Yeah.
Sure. So, again, all I've been doing is measuring to the dates of these eclipses. And we had this first Great American Total Solar Eclipse last year on August 21st. It was the first coast-to-coast total solar eclipse in 99 years, right? So this is It's a rare event. It's pretty significant. Well, there's another total solar eclipse that's going to occur in the United States in 2024. And these two eclipses create like an X over the nation, you know. The first one went from Oregon to Florida. The next one's going from Texas to Maine. So you have this big X over it. So what I've been doing is just measuring dates to these eclipses. And the reason I said June 18th is going to be a big time sacrifice is because it was 303 weeks before the second eclipse. Remember, crucifixion of Jesus Christ equals 303. This is like the number 33.
Yeah.
And if you measure from the last eclipse, it was 43 weeks. And in reduction gematria, Jesus Christ equals 43. So I saw those two alignments and I said, well, this is as solid as it gets. We might see something big on this date. And sure enough, you know, a couple of my followers, you know, sent that story to me as soon as he died, and I was able to put up a video that day. Because again, that's kind of the benefit too. Like when we were looking at a lot of false flag shootings and fake news events, it would often take several days for people to make a video because they had to break down the witness testimony. They had to look at the police report. They had to look at all the news. They were trying to find all these inconsistencies to show people that it was fake, right? Mm-hmm. Well, with numerology, you already know what date it is. As soon as they release the name, you have the gematria. You already have the numbers on the city, the location, the coordinates, stuff like that. All of that stuff's immediately available. So as soon as something happens, you can decode it, so to speak, run the numbers and kind of explain to people why something happened on that particular date where it did. So we have one step down where we're able to reverse engineer it, you know, take things after they happen and then say this is why it happened. What we do need to be better at is predicting things. And, you know, like I said, we're getting there. Zach Hubbard, by the way, who I learned this work from, he's been insanely good at predicting sports. This is a guy who literally predicted it would be the Broncos over the Panthers in the Super Bowl in October of that season. He even predicted who would win the MVP. And he predicted there'd be a Black Panther tribute at halftime, which there was. Beyonce doing the fist.
Is he making a lot of money with it? I hope so.
Well, he hasn't. He's been more concerned about just sharing this information and ending the tyranny, you know, much as I am.
But you got to finance what you're doing.
Right. And you know, there's a funny story about this too. You know, he actually went ahead and predicted the Super Bowl contenders for the next season, like immediately after the Super Bowl. And it was really, really, really eerie what happened. Neither of those teams even made the playoffs. He predicted Colts and Vikings. He was like, these two teams are a lock, right? Well, the Colts and Vikings both got eliminated from the playoffs on Christmas Eve that season. And that was the same night that Zach's house got hit by a car. Whoa. And 2 or 3 nights before that happened on YouTube, this weirdo named Montegraph, who we think is tied into the occult, he told Zach that he should run the numbers on New Year's Eve. And it's like, okay. But he didn't find out about that video until after the crash happened. And then people brought it to his attention. And sure enough, it was uploaded like the 21st. So there's this possibility that there's script flipping in sports. Because I think these sports are rigged. I mean, we have all the evidence we need to show you that these sports are run by the numbers. Okay. Yeah, if you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, would you say that, you know, you say there's flipping, or would you say it's that the needs change from what was in the numbers when Zach predicted it at the end of the Super Bowl, that the needs that for the information they had to communicate or for the agenda they were pushing, it shifted, and that's why the team shifted?
That could very well be. I mean, you know, it's funny because when you look at the numbers of the Super Bowl that did happen that year instead, this was the season where the Patriots came back against the Falcons. You find out that the same numbers we were talking about.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, the same numbers we were talking about were right there in the Super Bowl. So Zach kept talking about 25. It was the 97th season of the NFL. 97 is the 25th prime number. The Super Bowl was played on 2/5. And that was the same season they moved the kickoff to the 25-yard line even. And so he kept talking about the number 25. When the Colts and Vikings got eliminated the same night his house got hit by a car, the Vikings and Colts both scored 25 points in their games. That's a really weird score to have in a football game. And then the Patriots came back from 25 points down in the Super Bowl. So it's like we were onto it the whole time. It's just it was different teams. So perhaps they coded the same numbers somehow into different teams. I don't know, but it gets pretty heavy. So maybe what you're saying is right. I don't know what information is all.
Guessing.
The thing is, I don't know what information is all communicated in these numbers. Are they just stamping these rituals so that people who are in the know and know what to look for can find out and find for sure? Or are they actually communicating messages saying, hey, after this event, we're going to see an event at this location in so many days? I have a suspicion that they're kind of coding future false flags into current false flags. But again, that's only because I can recognize that some of the same numbers are popping up, but we're not able to read the code necessarily, so to speak, yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's where I'd love to connect you with my friend Ole Damagard, who doesn't have what you have with the dates to connect and the forwards and the backwards checking and of what had happened before, but with what is put in plain sight, if you can recognize the symbols, and he's done that successfully. I would love to have the two of you talk.
Well, yeah. I've always been very fond of his work, and the first time I saw Ole, I was like, this is a real truth seeker right here. This is not some plant, because the truth community, man, it's wicked. There's so many people out there who are touting disinformation, who are sending us goofy conspiracy theories. The whole flat earth movement. We could talk about that, but I don't want to,
No.
Right.
Well, he's very interested to connect with you, so we could talk about that later, but that's great that you know his work because wow, this will just, I guess. So going on in the vein where you were continuing, I know my friend who told me about you said that sometimes that there's the information that you guys have shared that some of the people may just be constructions like Triple X, because I didn't hear that one, and that they're actors who were built to fill what the numbers are foretelling.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
No, but could you go into that? No, he heard that from you, I think, or that's his question. Maybe no, maybe it's just his question. Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, this stuff all looks fishy on the surface, even, right? So this death of the rapper, it turns out that pictures had surfaced of his body after the shooting. There were also pictures of the car with the doors open, and in none of the pictures can you see any blood. There's no sign of any damage. I mean, the fact that this guy was shot in the driver's seat of his car to death by robbers, but there's no blood in the car, that alone is ridiculous. Yeah. But then you also look at the fact that he's missing a tattoo on his face in the death picture. So my belief is that this guy probably signed some sort of record contract, quietly, before he ever put a song up on SoundCloud even. And his idea was, I'm going to fill out this role. I'm going to be this sacrifice, so to speak. And I don't know, maybe they really do kill him. I have my doubts on that. If he's signing up for this, maybe he knows exactly what's going to happen. And then he's just taking a big payoff. Whenever an artist dies, their music sells big, so they could just go off and retire. Now, this guy was only 21 years old, so that's pretty young to go into retirement like that. I don't know exactly what to believe. Yeah. But so now when I talked about before why I was able to predict the date that someone like that would die. Sure. Now, as far as why it was him, well, again, able to reverse engineer this very quickly. The name Jesus Christ in the alphabetic order sums to 151. In the reverse order, XXX Tentacion equals 151. Now, in that reverse method, Jesus Christ equals 146. And this rapper died 146 days after his birthday. By the way, crucifixion of Jesus Christ, we talked about how that sums to 303. He died 303 weeks before the eclipse. In reduction, crucifixion of Jesus Christ equals 123. XXX Tentacion born on January 23rd, 123.
Oh,
So, if I had like a database, which this is ultimately what we would need if we really want to be able to predict these things, theoretically, I could have a database where we have everybody's information, birth dates, name gematria, nicknames, all that good stuff. And then we could say, okay, these are the numbers that we expect to be attributed. And in this case, I would have absolutely put 151 and 146 because those are the numbers of Jesus Christ. And if we can at least narrow it down to say, like, this guy who died was in the top, 2, 3, 4% of likelihoods in our database, you know what I mean? That would be the kind of thing that would completely turn this thing upside down, I think, because, people who are inquisitive and have a mind to think critically, from what I've discovered, they come across my work, especially the work that I've been putting out since the beginning of the year, and they're able to see it and know right away that, yes, this is absolutely what's going on, right? But there's a lot of people who are like, oh, you don't predict it, then it doesn't really matter. Predict something and then I'll believe it. And it's like, you're behind, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sharing this information without completely knowing what's going on. Like, I like to think I'm taking my followers kind of on my own journey for truth with me.
sure.
Um, so instead of saying, oh, maybe you should predict something, how about taking the knowledge I'm sharing and helping, contribute to it, helping expand on it? Because that's what I did. I mean, I found this knowledge and now I feel like I've been able to contribute my piece and now it's better for everybody. So and honestly, I wish more people would be, doing good work on this in the year and a half I've been doing it, but it's really starting to spread. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of YouTube channels popping up talking about gematria, but people also understand that this is very, very, there's a lot of eyes on it. People are getting censored quickly. One thing I've discovered is that a lot of my personal friends and family who never commented on anything I put online will kind of pull me aside in person and be like, hey, I've been watching a lot of your videos. And like a guy told me this weekend, he said, my girlfriend told me to stop watching your videos because I was talking about them too much. So it's cool. It's good to hear that because,
Sure.
not everybody shows their support publicly because they don't want to be on a list. They don't want to they don't want to mess with that. And for me, I said screw that a long time ago. I've been kind of an upset youth since school. I decided school was garbage when I was in third grade. I realized that this was not for us to learn. This is to spend our time in.
Hmm.
And I hated it. And I kind of rebelled against it when I was younger. And that rebellious attitude has kind of followed through with me. So the fact that we're living in this society constructed completely on lies, for me, that's something worth even dying for, that we got to get people to snap out of this, to wake up for it. So I don't really care what the repercussions of this are for me personally.
But take a breath.
I was never thrilled with life in the first place. So
Derek, we're going to break, and I don't always hear the music. So you've got about, oh, I'd say maybe, I'm trying to think. I'll cut it short because you've got way too much information. Let's do it. Let's say we'll have 6 minutes, 6 or 7 minutes, if you have to get something to drink, whatever, and then we'll pick it up. The line is open, so if you could mute your mic, and I'm gonna just, block my mic right now because the bumper is probably playing and we're not recording. There's a beep. Okay, so we'll see you on the other side.
sounds
Okay.
good.
Thank you, Derek. Okay, hang in there, guys. We'll be right back with more of Derek Tikkuri on Event Horizons. You don't want to miss this.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
Revolution Radio.
You don't see it, do you? How close we are to absolute chaos? The sick ones are sitting on their fat asses, eating and drink themselves into a stupor, polluting the world without a second thought while it goes down the toilet. Nobody wants to do the nasty work. You know, the shit that we all just think about. Most good citizens are just along for the ride and then bitch and moan and complain about everything when it doesn't work out. Not me. Get it done.
Revolution Radio, where we do the nasty work. www.freedomslips.com. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay, my friends, I think I'm getting a message that we are live right now, which means we've got extra time. As you can tell, we need every single minute because this is so chock full of information. Whoa! What a ride tonight. Oh my gosh, so much information. I thank you to my morning listener and my evening listener for getting me on time with everything. So, well, I've been talking, so it's all good. Anyhow, guys, with me is Derek Tikkuri, and he is the person who created this Gematrinator program, the calculator, which you can find on his website, which is gematrinator.com. I highly recommend that you go and explore and give yourself a lot of time. Oh my gosh, when you start playing around and entering names and addresses and dates and all kinds of information about stuff, you're going to be blown away. And you need to get familiar with some of his tutorials, which are on the site. You can look for the links. I put some of them in the show information as well. But you'll hear that repetition when he talks about Jesus Christ number and these other numbers and how many days before birthday and things that for me, I mean, maybe a lot of you are just, super sharp and you put it together right away. I need to hear the repetition and then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting what you're saying, that this shows up as the number. So there's a connection with the words Jesus Christ. There's a connection, and how many levels when we think about the structuring of this reality that Derek is sharing with us. It's like, whoa. I mean, it's just kind of infinite. It makes one think about the movie The Matrix, where suddenly, you're seeing where everybody's plugged in and all the number codes is flashing and flashing, up and down the walls. So it is a lot. And I do hope we will be getting Derek back often, because this stuff just blows me away. And getting him together with Ole, I know Ole is ready, and I'm so glad that Derek's familiar with his work. This will be something to hear two amazing minds, two people that really come from such a space to make it better for everybody in this world. Ooh, it's going to be incredible. So I'm your anchor and producer, Dr. Robin Falkov. My website is healthfreedomrights.com. Please feel free to contact me. I will get back to everybody, but if I don't, your email might not have gotten through. You know how that works sometimes. But there is a contact us page. You can look for the links horizontally under my picture, and there are also hot links on the main page. So I want to get Derek back on right now so we can get rocking and rolling, because we just have so much to cover. I mean, I'm learning so much, Derek. You're just laying it out where it can be absorbed so easily.
Well, thank you. I used to have a lot of problems with that, so I appreciate that. I try to simplify it over the years, and it's gotten a little better at it for sure.
I know what you mean. Okay.
And to your point, Robin, you were talking about how it's so much to take in at first, and I want to be the first to say I don't envy anybody who's just first discovering this knowledge and trying to absorb it. I mean, the instructional or tutorial pieces that I do have could probably use a little work. I think that's one area we're kind of lacking, but these days I refer people to just like the first chapter or two of Zach's book. I mean, he's selling it for only $5 on Etsy, $11 on Patreon, and it's 773 pages of basically, most of our American history by the numbers decoded.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it's excellent information, and it doesn't take long to, it doesn't take much reading to see what's going on. But, again, like it's a lot at first, but if you keep coming back and paying attention to it and looking at the television with your own critical eye, and, for instance, a friend of mine, he doesn't really like use the calculator himself, but he'll bring something up with me saying like, this looked really suspicious. Can you run the numbers? And literally every time there's been something to it, so it's just it's a slow thing to wake up to, but once you see it, it's definitely what's happening.
Well, then I can count my blessings that I was fascinated by numerology when I was in my early teens, because it just, I got the connections with the basic English ordinal numbers. So that's,
yep.
That was an advantage.
For any of the listeners, too, who are thinking about, like, if I go to the calculator, what do I type in? What am I looking for? Well, what you want to do, I think, primarily, is you're kind of looking for alignments between your name gematria, and full name seems to be the most significant, your first, middle, last name, and then birthdays of you and your family members. So let me give you an example. We were talking about the number 911. And this one it's a super significant number to the occult, not just because of the date of the attacks, but for a number of reasons. And it turns out this is some sort of organic number, I think, that we see. So, for instance, I was born 1 month, 19 days before my mom. Her full name in reverse reduction equals 119. And I was also born 9 months, 11 days before my dad's birthday. My dad and I, both of our full names sum to 130 in that same reverse reduction method. I recently bought a house for exactly $130,000, and the address is the same year my dad was born in. So that's pretty out there, One more example, too, is that my full name in the reverse alphabetic order sums to 337, and I was born 3,307 days after my brother, the youngest of my 3 older brothers. And then I looked at his numerology and the birth of his 2 children, and I found that his wife, whose name sums to 130 in the alphabetic order, she was exactly 1,313 weeks old when she gave birth to their son, whose name sums to the 13th Fibonacci number, 233. And again, the Fibonacci number, that's a very important sequence to numerology. If you click the numbers on the calculator at gematrinator.com, you'll get like a numbers properties form. So if it's a prime number, it'll tell you which prime number it is. If it's a Fibonacci, it'll tell you which Fibonacci it is. And those are very significant to the study, too. These prime number relationships are super significant. And it's bizarre. I mean, like I said, I didn't expect when I first started looking into this stuff that I would be able to decode my own name and family and see that there was, something going on there. But that's what it's become. And now a good chunk of my work is devoted to this organic matrix, right? For instance, I just put a bunch of old music that I made when I was younger up on SoundCloud yesterday. And, I did some work to get graphics up for the songs and everything. And the next day I thought, this was a lot of creative effort I've put into the world. And I've noticed that this is kind of not quite numerology, but when you enter a creative state of mind, you're actually connecting to something. You're connecting to this higher intelligence, so to speak. People call it Earth intelligence. People call it the noosphere. Depends on what study you're coming from. But I absolutely believe that our creativity is partially a gift, and we just have to find ways to channel it. So as of that date, when I put this music up, I was exactly 33 years and 7 weeks old. Remember, my name sums to 337, and it was 337 days after the eclipse, which is what I talk about all the time. And 337's the 68th prime number. The date had 68 numerology, 7 plus 23 plus 20 plus 18. So I'm like, wow, like all these little things I'm doing, like without thinking about it. My webpage, for instance, was 137 days before my birthday. Webmaster equals 137 in Gematria. So like every time I've looked back at something I did that I didn't plan on doing and then like decoded it, I should say almost every time, there's been some sort of significant alignment. So yeah, I think this whole code is rooted in reality, but my belief is that I'm not the first person to come around and build a Gematria calculator and make these observations. It's just I'm the first one to do so publicly and try to share with everybody without judgment what I'm finding, because this type of knowledge is sequestered to secret societies. Right. And lower level Freemasons, for instance, they don't have any idea about Gematria, but once you get to the top, then they'll probably know about it. And that's what this is. This is like 33rd degree Freemasonry knowledge, I believe. And this is what we're trying to share with the world, and not everybody wants to accept it. That's fine. We don't need everybody. We just need enough that we can start to change the world, because definitely, we look at this control structure, and ultimately my beef with this whole thing is how our time is sold for money. As technology has advanced so much in the past 50, 60 years, we find that we still are stuck with the 8-hour workday and 40-hour work week. And, the wealthy class, the elites, they might have jobs, and some of them might work a lot of CEOs. That's fine. But they're making a lot of money. They get a lot of vacation. There's a lot of freedom there. And I think that type of freedom should be shared by everybody. I don't see freedom as going to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And for me, I'm very blessed to be in the position I am. I can work from home primarily. So I feel kind of obligated to use some of that time to, share what I'm discovering so we can try and change this. And I don't know what the answer is to get out of this. I'm not against working. Like, I think we should all do a little bit of work. I just don't think we all need to work as hard and often as we do. Those who want to work hard and often, they should be rewarded. But the fact that so many people are struggling to live right now when they're working 1, 2, 3 jobs even, that needs to stop. That's ridiculous. Yeah. And there's ways to build free energy right now that this is starting to catch on. In fact, I have the blueprints for somebody. A follower sent me these blueprints for a machine that makes free energy. And I haven't looked too deeply into it yet, but it's something I'm definitely going to be working on. She knows people who have built it for themselves. And if we can get free energy, if we can start to learn how to grow our own food again, then we don't need this fake fiat currency that they've printed for us and, raised us to tell is so important. I feel like people work for money and they have this idea that money is the ultimate validation of good effort. And what I'm trying to say is that money is just paper that people with an agenda are printing. And those who have more of it have been rewarded for playing along with the system. And I don't want to play along with the system. I mean, I have enough money to live and get by, but I'm not looking to get rich off this. That's why I haven't monetized any of this work. I just want people to wake up.
Well, I would say from what you're sharing and what you have put together as to who is using this system, they already have things in place where now they are shutting down people who are living off the grid. They're fining them for having other energy sources. They're fining them for accessing water. They're fining them for all kinds of things that it becomes almost impossible for them to stay there because they can't survive. They can't have their basic needs met. So we really have a lot of work to do to overcome what has been set in place. A lot of it is looked at as the Agenda 21, 2025, 2030, something that I didn't pay a lot of attention to until a couple of years ago. And I thought, well, I better catch up and see. And when you get the understanding and you look around at the way cities are transitioning and the reduction, to small apartments, no more big houses. I think 800 square feet is what they're trying to do. And the ideal would be 400 or 200, and everything in a separate, in a central location that's easily managed. Have you gotten into any of that?
Yeah, a little bit. I feel like a lot of these disasters that we're starting to see, particularly these wildfires,
Yep.
are part of a greater long-term scheme to kind of funnel people out of the wilderness, out of the rural areas into larger cities. There's been some really good work done by some YouTubers talking about these wildfires and how they don't at all seem natural. You look at some of the aftermath, particularly the Santa Rosa fires from last year, and you have like blocks of homes just completely crumbled and destroyed, but with no fire damage to the trees in the yard. So what's going on here? You're seeing cars flipped over, cars set ablaze, but from what? And a lot of people are theorizing that there's some sort of directed energy technology being used for this. And
Yeah.
I almost don't want to believe in that because it kind of makes us feel helpless. But, we got to figure out what's going on here, because I think that is kind of what's happening. I mean, we had a movie come out last year called Geostorm, and to me, that was mockery. It definitely seems like there's some sort of weather control capabilities.
Oh, God.
And
that's been for years. It's
yeah.
After World War II and Senator K. Bailey Hutchinson in Texas trying to apply for weather modification bills, and they never wanted to pass it because of the repercussions, and they'd be open to lawsuits for the damage that would be done in the peripheral areas when they brought water to the ones, that they were working on. But yeah, you're spot on with what you're saying. And the directed energy weapons are like a slap in the face, to all of us. Like, you see, we're doing it because we can.
Yep.
It's it's stuff like that. I find it very interesting that you've got the same insights there, pretty much.
Yeah, and just to speak about weather control real quickly by the numbers.
Yes, please.
You mentioned the Texas weather modification. I think it was Texas. I forget what state, but
that was where the senator was, who was trying to put a bill through and get it approved for Congress for a weather modification bill.
Okay. Well, what I was talking about is, I think as far back, it was in the 1890s was the first ever government grant for weather modification experiments. And I think it was in Texas also. I'm not sure about that. But either way, this has been going on for a long time. And what I like to point people to as perfect evidence of this is that the word flood, using the alphabetic order, equals 52. In the year 1952, there was a flooding in Europe, and this was really sudden. I'm going to try and look up the name of the city. Lynmouth, that was it. So August 15th and 16th of 1952, there was a sudden flood, and it was known as the Lynmouth flood, killed 34 people. And this was a storm that literally popped up out of nowhere. And what was found out later is that the British military was running an operation called Operation Cumulus, which was cloud seeding for rain. Mm-hmm. And of course, now they call this a conspiracy theory, but it's pretty clear that's what happened. Well, so this is in 1952. Exactly 52 years later, to the day, there was another flood in England 52 miles away. Whoa. And it was the same thing. The storm popped up out of nowhere. This time, nobody died, fortunately, but a lot of damage occurred to the city. So ask yourself, what are the odds of this? Is that how nature works? Nature knows flood equals 52, so it does these two things 52 years apart, 52 miles apart? I don't think so. I think there's something more sinister to it, unless someone can prove me otherwise, because of all these things that are happening, like potentially directed energy weapons, we have to kind of assume the worst now. I mean, that's really what it looks like to me.
And ask you, what was the date in August? August what?
The Lynmouth flood was on August 15th and 16th in the year 1952.
It caught my attention. My birthday's August 15th, so I thought, is that what he said? Okay.
Well, that's awesome. That's the 227th day of the year, and 227 is one of the most significant numbers to this whole numerology study, so that's kind of cool.
Oh, okay. I'll have to ask you about that off the air, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And then the 2004 flood, 52 years after that, was in Boscastle, and that took place on August 16th. And again, that's 52 miles away. So look those up for yourself. I mean, it's pretty shocking once you start to really dig in and look at what's happening.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Gosh, I mean, it is to repeat, the same thing. It's wild. I'm curious to see what's going to happen with this lunar eclipse.
Yep.
Yeah. Just so much. I mean, I could say that about everything, It's, looking at the work you do.
Sure.
It's just all so significant. So go ahead.
Yeah, with this lunar eclipse, what I found is that there's often tributes exactly 1 week away from a lunar eclipse. The word lunar equals 33 reverse. The word eclipse equals 33 standard reduction. 1 week equals 33 in reduction. So does 7 days. And the Empire State Building was lit up 1 week exactly before the lunar eclipse in January. And it was lit up with the colors of Phantom of the Opera. And every single word in Phantom of the Opera has 33 gematria, whether it's ordinal or reduction or Sumerian.
Wow, that's bizarre.
And and that was exactly 1 week before. And that's when I started to pick up on the fact that 1 week away from eclipses, there's always something. LeBron James, for instance, he turned 33. And then exactly 7 days, 1 week later, he played the Jazz. Jazz equals 33. Or was it, let me double check that. It's a Utah Jazz. I forget, there's a 33 there somewhere. Anyway, he turned 33. He played the Jazz a week later, and he scored 33 points in that game. So there's always something there. Now, this time, I'm actually predicting August 3rd to be the next major sacrifice. And the reason is because it's 1 week exactly after the eclipse. It's also the date written 8/3, and the word murder in the reverse order equals 83. Let's see. Also, this date measures up to the eclipses. Let's see. It's going to be 347 days after the 2017 eclipse, and the word sacrifice in Hebrew Gematria equals 347. And that's the 69th prime number. Eclipse equals 69. So what a date for an eclipse sacrifice, So that's kind of the date I have pinned for the next big one. Again, I don't know who it's going to be. If people want to run numbers on random celebrities and see if they found any, let me know. But
wow.
I feel like at least this date is pretty strong.
Wouldn't you say we'd probably find a few that would fit the numbers, and then you have to figure out which one it would be?
Yeah, that's happened before where there's been multiple deaths, and
they
times
also.
that's happened.
Huh.
Yeah, they'll both have numbers that fit, but the bigger celebrity will have the solid riddle. You know what I mean? As in the case with this rapper XXX Tentacion, he was the #1 selling rapper, and his new numbers lined up better than Jimmy Wapo, who also died the same day. He had some of the same numbers, but they weren't. It wasn't as solid as the XXX rapper.
Gotcha.
So it's a young study. We're all trying to figure this out as we go. So it's tough.
I hear you. Yeah. Gosh, I mean, look at all you've accomplished in such a short time. I mean, that blows me away as well. You said 1.5 years of putting all this together?
Yeah, I have this obsessive compulsive tendency that I always fought through my childhood. And I always had different outlets for it. I made music for a few years, and that kind of satisfied that part of my brain. Then I got into programming and started making different applications, a few games here and there. And then I found Gematria once I started looking for truth, and I was like, man, this is powerful stuff. Then I discovered my numerology, is so similar to this Gematria that I'm like, well, this must be what I'm here for. So it's something I've stuck with, and I'm going to keep doing it as long as I feel like I'm learning something, as long as I feel like I'm growing, and as long as we're getting closer and closer to the truth. This study, it kind of cost me a relationship. I was seeing a girl for 7 years. We were living together. She
Oh,
didn't
no.
like that I was getting into this stuff, and I think that kind of led to us breaking up ultimately because we just didn't see things the same anymore. And I would mention something, and she'd yell and scream at me like, "What the heck?" So, yeah, but
I hear you. I
the truth is
understand.
most important to me. So,
Yes, yes. And that's life, It's like suddenly you're completely opposite from the person that you've been with for so long. But that's, that happens. That happens. And something like what you're doing is so compelling. I would think a lot of people would be very concerned that they'll get lost in it. So it's, how do you dole out your time so that it's not the only thing you do. So I think it's great that you have a regular job and other responsibilities.
right. And yeah, I mean, if I didn't, I would certainly be doing this literally all day probably.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe one day I'll have to try to find a way to monetize it. Like I said, I'm still afforded enough free time where I can do this and still contribute and still get the truth out. So I don't really see the need to quit my job or anything at the moment. Zach released this book and he didn't get as much support as he was hoping. Granted, he wasn't able to get the book printed because he included too many newspaper headlines. These publishers didn't want to put them in their books. So I think that kind of hurt his sales. So he's been selling these cheap online books, and it hasn't been enough to support him. But he recently sold his house, and he's got a little free time now to do the work again. But it's tough because you find the truth, you find something that's so overwhelmingly obvious as far as we see it, but only so many people feel that way about it, and there's a lot to be said for it. Like this whole thing, it's math, but it's just addition. A lot of people come into this stuff and they're like, numbers, and then they run away. And it's funny, isn't it, in this society, Robin, how many people like you ask them a math question or something about an equation, and they're just like, I'm dumb at math. Like they'll raise their hand. They will jump out of a crowd and be like, I'm terrible at math, as if it's cool. Like for some reason, people love to admit how bad they are at math. I don't get it.
Oh, it's
And
embarrassing. I mean, yeah.
yeah,
My mind is boggled when I see somebody trying to make change from a simple purchase and they can't figure out how much changes do. I mean, I've got that covered. When it gets to higher math, no, I need a lot of work. But when I see that and they are truly stumped, stumped, kind of like frozen in place, so you try to help them out and tell them what it is. And it's like, wow, it's shocking. And it's the dumbing down of your generation, the generation that came after you. You've got a lot of work to do.
It's true. I mean, I feel like there's so many people out there just not thinking, and it's not because that person is dumb or that person was raised poorly. It's because there's this society in which it's encouraged that. Because the less we know, the easier it is for them to get away with things. And here we've found basically the ultimate code of this knowledge of what they're doing. And, Lord only knows how bad they want to keep people from it. My channel had 7,000 subscribers when they deleted it. I was just a small guy, but they can only afford to have this get so big. And, with my new channel, now I'm sitting around 5,000 subscribers. And I just wonder, like, how long are they going to let this go on before they shut this one down? Because they might always let you on with some subscribers, but they don't want anybody to have like a library of years and years of these videos sitting on YouTube for people to go back and review. I think that's kind of part of it. So we're exploring different networks. There's a new video site called real.video, and this is like a liberty network. Anyone who promotes mainstream agendas or propaganda will be banned. And it's taking a hard stance on what they'll allow on the network, which you can call censorship, but as long as they, are allowing people like me who are trying to speak the truth, then I think it's a positive platform. So that's one. Steemit, BitChute, these are others that we're trying out, but It's like YouTube is really still the central video site. I mean, when I compare my hits on YouTube, 250,000 on this rapper video, and then you go to BitChute and you get like 300-400. Like, we know where we need to get this information out. So basically all I've changed as far as YouTube goes is that I'm not doing videos on certain subjects. What got me deleted off of YouTube was making videos on school shootings, talking about them being fake. And they did not have any of those. As soon as those videos went up, they were taken down within a day. And ultimately, I had 2 of them deleted, which meant I couldn't upload for 2 weeks. And then during that 2-week period, they gave me a strike on a video from 6 months prior, and that deleted my channel altogether. So that's what we're up against. It's
yes,
the hand of the man slamming down on us.
It's so many different ways. I think back, I don't know how many years ago, talking with friends and, seeing their kids come home and they're taking out a calculator to do their homework in the 4th grade. And I said, what's going on? Why are they using a calculator? Oh, the teacher says that's what they need to learn how to use, because that's how people function now. I said, what? That's insane. What about learning how to do it in your head? And then later, maybe you move on to that. But as you were saying, no skills, they're left without skills.
Yeah, because look at India, for instance, right? It's not hard to find videos of those children doing these absolutely freaking phenomenal mathematical feats in their head.
Yeah.
And there's like a system for it. Of course, they don't teach us that system, but imagine how good these kids would be at Gematria when they're older. They could learn that skill really young. And to me, again, the calculator, even for the simplest problems, is part of the dumbing down. And, they've flooded our heads with all this talk about math, advanced calculus, trigonometry, subjects that people see and, they don't even want to do any algebra. But here we have this Gematria, which is just adding the letters in the phrase and then measuring from one date to another. And it's just too obvious. And to show you how obvious this is that we're being lied to by the media and that these events are staged, let's talk about 3 news stories from just the past 7 days, right?
Sure, please give us your way of analysis, because you've got a network here and an audience that doesn't trust what's out there. So it's
good.
Can't wait to hear what you've got to share. So go ahead, please.
Let's start with I think this was last Friday. Let me check the date. Friday, let's see, July 19th. So this was Thursday. Remember, Ride the Ducks boat in Branson, Missouri, supposedly capsized, killing 17 people? The word kill in Gematria equals 17. And think about how 17 were killed at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas.
Oh,
the name Marjorie Stoneman equals the 17th Fibonacci number.
Oh, gosh. But how do people know to recognize the Fibonacci numbers? You know what I'm saying? And what other mathematical codes do they need familiarity with? They need to know the prime numbers, the Fibonacci numbers. What else?
Well, triangular numbers is another one. So think about like bowling pins, right? The 4th triangular number is 10. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10.
Gotcha.
So the 36th triangular number is 666. So the number 36 has a relationship to 666. And think about how 36 is 666. It's kind of cool.
Yes. Thank you so much.
And on my website, anytime you click a number, like if you type in a word and then you see the numbers underneath, click that number and you'll get a pop-up with the number properties. So if one of those numbers is a Fibonacci number, it'll tell you. So the name Marjorie Stoneman equals 1597 in Jewish Gematria. You click 1597, it'll say Fibonacci, yes, 17th. And so those are some of the tools I try to give people to clue them in on those relationships.
I'm blown away by what you have in this program. This is incredible. Okay.
Well, thank you. All right, no worries. So this whole thing with the ducks thing, right? They told us that 31 people were on board, and the number 13 is 31 is the reflection of 13, and numbers forwards and backwards are somewhat related also. The word ducks equals 13 in reduction. And I don't know if you remember, I think 2015, do you remember when a Ride the Ducks bus crashed on a bridge in Seattle? This occurred on September 24th, 2015, they said 4 people were killed in that crash. If you measure from the date of that Ride the Ducks bus crash in 2015 to the date of this crash, including the end date, it was exactly 1,030 days. Again, the word ducks equals 13. And they said that there were 31 people on board. This is 3 weeks, 1 day before Missouri's anniversary of statehood. So there's 113 for you. Then there was this other story. We had a building collapse in Miami Beach. And think about this, a collapse in Miami. Do you remember another story about a collapse in Miami this year? There was a pedestrian bridge collapse in March.
Yes. Yes, and I know right where it was. I had driven past it many times.
So measuring from the bridge collapse to this building collapse is exactly 130 days. Again, just like the number 13. And as I've been saying for months and months in my blog, 13 is the primary ritual number. I believe this comes from the moon, which completes, 13 lunar phases once every few years. There's some sync between the number of lunar phases and lunar orbits, which are 2 different measurements, but they sync up after 13 synodic months. So anyways, there's one more story too. We also had let's see, which one? Oh, Toronto. There was a shooting in Toronto. And think about how this was in Greektown in Toronto, 1 day before the fires in Greece.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty weird too. But there was another terrorist attack in Toronto earlier this year. Remember, they said a van attack where someone drove a van over pedestrians.
Yep,
well, if you measure from that date to the date of this event, it was exactly 13 weeks.
Wow.
So this number 13, they just put it everywhere as often as possible into these things. And if you know how to look for it, you're going to find it just about every time. Of course, not everything is centered around 13, but even in this Toronto shooting, they told us 13 people were injured. So it's like these numbers are right under your nose. You just got to know kind of what to look for. And what I've been really focusing a lot of work on lately is this crucifixion code, just because it's so logical. And you find that when people die, quite often they have numbers in either their birth date or the number of days to their birth date that are similar to the numerology of Jesus Christ that I talked about earlier in the show. It's as if they're repetitively reliving the crucifixion of Jesus through the numbers, like almost every day. And, from what I understand, Jesus was a real person. Like there's a lot of historical context about this. And, it seems like he was a ritual sacrifice. And whatever group of people did that might still be in control or are at least very invested in not spreading that story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's something we're still trying to get to the bottom of, but no doubt that this crucifixion code, I mean, it's so powerful.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. I was just entering Mercer County, New Jersey after the Miami Beach collapse of the hotel that was scheduled for demolition, and it went down. And then this house in Mercer County. So I don't have your familiarity because the English ordinal was a 284, then the full reduction 104, the reverse ordinal 283, and the reverse full 112. I don't know if that matches up with Miami Beach, or any of the one that you mentioned that had come before.
It might. I'd have to dig in a little bit and really take a look because, you also got to measure to the date of statehood for that state. That's usually relevant, and also the governor of the state. And it's a lot to get into right now for beginners, but basically you realize that these false flags, it's not just that these events occur on certain dates, but the people who are placed into office, who preside over that jurisdiction, were put in office on a specific date so that when you measure from the date they took office to that false flag, you're going to get a relevant number to the ritual. And this never, ever fails.
So all this data that you're weaving together makes a really tightly woven fabric, ultimately.
I believe so. I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. Can I give an example of this as far as the leaders?
Sure.
So remember we had this cave rescue in Thailand
Yes.
And
yes. Everybody.
it's
Yeah.
even before the rescue was finished, they had a film crew on scene, like ready to make a movie about this. It's ridiculous. And this was all going on during the World Cup. There's a soccer team missing in a cave. Every day the top story was this stupid soccer team. So if the fact that it was airing during the World Cup wasn't suspicious enough for you, check this out. In Gematria, Thailand equals 33 in reduction. So does the words Thai cave, by the way, 33.
Wow.
On the date the team initially got lost in the cave, the king of Thailand was 330 days after his birthday. Also, false flag equals 33 in Gematria. Not only that, but Thailand also has a prime minister. And on that same date, the prime minister was 3 months and 3 days after his birthday, which fell on a date with 33 numerology. And the prime minister's name, Chan O Cha, think about that. Chan O Cha, CC. You know, he's got the hyphens in his name. So CC, 33.
Yeah.
And it even goes further. Like when you write out 33, it sums to 156 ordinal. And on the date that they were all rescued, the prime minister was 15 weeks and 6 days after his birthday. The king of Thailand was born on the date, leaving 156 days in the year. So the number 33 is just stamped all over this. And again, 13 members of the soccer team, that ritual number. Yep. The name of the soccer team was Wild Boars. And if you go to my calculator and type out Wild Boars, you get 103, like the number 13.
Right. Wow.
And you know, this rescue was completed 13 days after Elon Musk's birthday. Remember, Elon Musk was building a mini sub supposedly to help save these kids.
Yes, and then he had a hissy fit. Yes.
Right. So there's a lot more to this. I actually made a really long post on this, but I think it's a really, really good post because it's so solid. I mean, of course, it ties into the World Cup as well. So let me just finish on this one too, real quick, if you don't mind.
Please, no, I'm. You know, we've got probably 18 minutes. So,
okay.
Yeah, 17 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so another number that's super significant. We've talked a lot about 33 throughout the course of this show. I think everybody kind of recognizes that 33 is the special number.
Yes.
The number 47 is also of utmost significance. It might even be more important than 33. I don't know, but it's up there. On the Freemasonic emblem, there's a compass in a square, and that compass is set to 47 degrees. And again, this has to do with the mathematics of the sun and the earth. If you look at the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, they're both 23.5 degrees away from the equator, which means they're a total of 47 degrees apart. The word time, using the alphabetic order, equals 47. The most significant marker of time is a total eclipse. And in reduction, total eclipse equals 47. This year's World Cup final was played exactly 47 weeks after the total eclipse, with the end date included. And it was won by France. Type in France, it equals 47.
Now,
the
if
host
I can
of the
interrupt
World
you
Cup.
for 1 second. When
Sure.
you're doing this analysis, are you looking at the things that you said before, like who is the president of the country? What was the year that it came into being? Are you adding all of that in, or just the basic data?
I usually start with just the basic data, you know, the name of the culprit, the perpetrator, if it's a false flag, the name of the city alongside the date. There's always a connection between the name of the city and the date. For instance, just off the top of my head, we had a shooting at the Capital Gazette newspaper in Maryland, which was a complete tribute 100% to the Charlie Hebdo shooting by the numbers. But Annapolis, Maryland sums to 72 in reduction, and that shooting occurred on a date with 72 numerology, 6 plus 28, or 29, I forget, plus 20 plus 18. So there's always some sort of connection there. In the event of Emmanuel Macron, for instance, he's the president of France. I did not measure to his birthday, but I'm going to check it. And let's see, 40 years. Oh, yeah. So he was he was 40 years and 7 months old, just like 47.
Yep. Oh my gosh.
He hadn't reached that date yet, but he was a week away from being 40 months and 7 days old. Now, to finish off the 47, we talked about the eclipse. France equals 47. They won 47 weeks after the eclipse. Russia equals 470 in Jewish Gematria. Trump equals 470 in Jewish Gematria, and they met exactly 47 weeks after the eclipse. Anyways, think about the name of this cave. It was called the Tham Luang Cave. And when you write out Thwam Long, it sums to 47, reverse reduction. In regular reduction, Tham Luang Cave equals 47. In Jewish Gematria, Tham Luang equals 407. And the date that they first got trapped, 6 plus 23 plus 18 equals 47. The 47th prime number, 211. The king of Thailand took the throne 20 months, 11 days before they got trapped in the cave. Twitter equals 47. Elon Musk got in a Twitter feud with one of the coaches of the soccer team. And then Elon Musk turned 47 years old 5 days after the team first got trapped.
Wow.
So how obvious is this? Like, what more do we need to show that this is all being concocted? And, some people still think this is all organic numerology. I will say this is so well coordinated, it seems hard to believe people are doing it, but I think there's definitely human intervention. I mean, just watch the World Cup game itself. You had
AI intervention. I mean, it's been around, so I mean, they have the ability to, my God, any creation, it seems.
Yeah. This World Cup incident, the score was 4-1. France was running away with the game.
Yeah.
The ball got bounced back to the goalie, and the goalie made this hilarious misplay, gave it to a guy right next to him, who then kicked the ball in the goal for like the easiest goal in World Cup final history. And just watching that play, you're like, really? Did he really just make that mistake in the biggest game of his life? But then you run the numbers and you realize those two players, the goalie and then the guy who scored the goal, they were born 219 days apart. This game took place 219 days before 2/19/2019. The word feminism equals 219. And think about how the group Pussy Riot ran onto the field during the game as a feminist exhibition for women's rights. All of these things are connected by the numbers. So not only does that goal look suspicious, but when you realize the numerology behind it, you realize there's something more going on. So again, this is all the evidence I think people should need to realize that this stuff is rigged, because billions of people literally watching the World Cup final, and of course they're gonna rig it up for some sort of ritual.
Incredible. The connections are incredible. Yeah, I think you're going to have a lot of traffic on your website.
Well, I hope so. It's funny. I launched the website in January of 2017, and traffic started slowly but surely building up over time. Well, just after I put my video out on the Las Vegas shooting, by the way, as I was dragging that video to upload into YouTube, I lost power. My whole block lost power. The only power outage I've ever had at my house.
Yeah, and then bad boy.
Seriously. A week later, my website statistics suddenly dropped. There was one day where they were like really small. It was like 660 visits, 4,100 page views. Funny, because those are numbers I constantly talk about, especially at that time.
Yeah.
And then after that, my hits were reduced by 50%, and they've never gone up since. So if I wanted to put advertisements on my website, I would not be getting the proper money that I should be getting, because my stats were hacked, and they've never gone up since then.
Oh my gosh.
So I have no idea how many people are viewing my site. My blog, too, ever since I put my blog online, I think it started with like 100 hits per post. Now I'm getting like 120 hits per post. And my work on YouTube kind of blew up since then. So what's going on? I can't believe anything that's on the internet anymore. I just can't.
Wow. I hear you.
Especially since Zach Hubbard, granted he has more followers on his blog than I do, but he gets over 10,000 hits a day most of the time on his blog. So if he's getting that many and I got the website and I'm not getting anywhere near that much and it's never gone up, I don't know. Like I said, I've done work kind of talking about how YouTube videos and view counts are based on formulas. There's always like a clear connection between the numbers of likes and views. There's a formula based on time since it was uploaded that it's undeniable once you dig into it. So I don't believe my YouTube view counts. It tells me I have 250,000 on this video, but I could have well over 1 million as far as I know. It's just like I said, it's all seems to be under some sort of control. And I didn't believe that before I started the work, but now I feel like I've seen the evidence that is what's happening.
Yes, I know very well what you're talking about. I've experienced it. So, yeah.
No surprise. Meanwhile, you make a video on the Mandela effect. You make a video on flat Earth, and all of a sudden it gets promoted. It gets 95% likes on the videos. I had a video start to go viral after SpaceX launched Starman into orbit. Remember that? And I talked about how that was all about the number 49. Starman equals 49. What is it? Yeah, Starman. David Bowie died 40. Oh, wait. Let me dig this post up real quick so I don't sound like a fool.
Sure. Well, I don't think that's going to be easy, but okay. Yeah, and then there's we have probably five more minutes because a friend was asking about the movie Skyscraper, which I didn't see. I don't know anything about. So let's hear about that.
I didn't really do much work on Skyscraper, but I will point out there was a skyscraper fire that same day. Oh. I do have a post on that, and it was just like, what are the odds that we get a skyscraper fire in the news on that date? It's same old stuff. Okay, so here's what I think is the undeniable numerology from the whole Starman thing. So SpaceX in the reverse order equals 94. So does David Bowie in the standard order. He equals 94. And when Starman was launched, they put 2 different David Bowie songs on loop, on infinite loop, supposedly. And think about how we went to the moon, allegedly, in 1969. That's 49 years before this SpaceX launch. In reduction gematria, Falcon Heavy equals 49. That was the name of the rocket. Tesla Roadster equals 49. Starman equals 49 reverse. David Bowie equals 49. And the name of the song Space Oddity, which was playing on loop, equals 49. Now, the 49th prime number, 227. David Bowie died 2 years and 27 days before the SpaceX launch. So there was a lot more that goes into this. I got a big long post, but what's funny about this is that I put this video out and people were looking for videos about Starman because a lot of people said it looked fake. Even Elon Musk said it looked fake. So after a few days, all of a sudden my video went from like 3,000 views to 30,000 views. And I was like, wow, this has never happened. And I realized that it picked up on some algorithm, right? And within hours, it had 50,000 views.
Wow.
In those same 3 hours, even though I had like 800 likes and about 450 dislikes at the beginning of the day, all of a sudden, by the end of the day, I had 850 likes and 860 dislikes. And then it stopped. So the dislikes went up to 10 more than the likes, and then they stopped. And then the video stopped getting views because the way YouTube sees it, more people dislike than like, so we're going to take it off the algorithm. So what I'm saying is that they must have sent like a troll army of 400 plus stock accounts over the few hours to keep this video from getting too viral.
Yep.
Because the information in it was too solid. It was too undeniable. I mean, it looks fake in the first place, and then you look at the numbers and realize what they're really doing, and it's just a joke. It's laughable. So they didn't delete my video, but they found a way to suppress it. So, because they had literally no reason to delete that video. They had no reason to delete some of my other videos too, but, they can at least say that I was talking about Jews or something, and that's off limits, whatever.
Oh, you were inciting thinking. That's dangerous to incite thinking. Come on.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to incite a hell of a lot of thinking, and definitely against the grain, but I'm proud of it.
Yeah, no, your work is amazing. It is, and I've got to get Zach's book, and Yeah, just amazing.
And Zach's another guy who would probably love to be a guest on the show as well too, if you ever want to have him on. He has a really good ability to keep things simple that I've tried to emulate to get to this point. He's got a lot of great, perfect examples too. I think, he would be a great guest, and like I said, he'd probably be willing to be on sometime.
Sure. Yeah, and we'll plan when I can coordinate with you in LA. That would be just wild.
Yeah, I'd love that. That'd be great.
Yeah, so much amazing stuff. Now, do you do any events, or, well, this is a year and a half that you're doing this. Have you considered doing any events, any, expos or presentations, or,
It's never come up yet. I like to think this work is just kind of starting to get basic enough and well accepted that should be a possibility in the near future. Some of my followers have been talking about starting up like a Gematria con or something where people can get together and, I can do a speech or whatever. I would like to see it more incorporated with conventions that are already going on within the truth community, because I feel like it shouldn't just be this niche. It should be part of the whole truth that we're trying to spread. So I'm kind of waiting for an opportunity, so to speak, but I would definitely do it.
How would you ever pick the date?
I mean, I would just go when they tell me to, but and then I'm sure I could look back afterwards and say, oh, this date was significant because of this, But it's tough not to look at the numbers when you like plan something ahead of time, like if I want to have a game night at my house with the family, I'm like typing in game night in my calculator and looking for a date that matches. I found that you shouldn't waste your time too much in that. It's live your own life, and synchronicity happens around you is what I've discovered. So I try to tell people that. One guy, he was on a dating site and someone sent him a message and he's like, this girl, she's got that 126, man. I don't know about the 126. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you're not doing this right. You got the wrong idea. Like, live your life, let the numbers happen. I don't want to say it's all under control, but we're all part of something greater and we should just enjoy that.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And for people to reach you, what's the best way for them to do that? Because we probably have almost a minute.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I've been doing pretty good at keeping up on my email lately. My email is on the website. At the very bottom, it says contact. The email is Derek, DEREK, at Gematrinator.com. That's GEMATRINATOR. And if you type in Gematria calculator on Google, it'll pop up near the top too. So that's one way to do it. Or just I'd say that's the best way to do it, because the YouTube stuff is getting kind of overwhelming. I also have a Discord chat. If you go to my website and look at miscellaneous on the top, you'll see a drop down and they'll say Discord chat, and there's always like 20 to 30 people signed on at least. And there's usually I might not always be on there, but people drop in and they have conversations about this. And that's what's really helped accelerate this research, is people helping to look